Okey-doke. Good afternoon. This is the November 21st meeting of the Ordinance Committee. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Ordinance Committee Chair Randy Rouse.
Here.
Councilmember Kathy Murillo.
Here.
Councilmember Frank Hotchkiss.
Yes, here.
We'll open up for public comment. For any comment that's not on the agenda, seeing none, we'll close public comment and go to the staff report. Mr. Stuffler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Andrew Stuffler, the building official for the city. Today I bring before the Ordinance Committee an ordinance to put into effect some expedited electric vehicle charging station permit processing that was required based on a 2015 Senate bill at the state level. Senate Bill 1236 was signed into law in 2015, and it required communities of more than 200,000 population to enact an ordinance similar to this in 2016, and in 2017 the rest of the cities, like the cities of the size of Santa Barbara, have to have an ordinance in place in order to be compliant with the law. I mentioned that it mandates expedited permitting. In this case, the expediting part is to be able to submit electronically, which was very similar to the solar photovoltaic ordinance that we were required by the state to enact a couple years ago, and then also to eliminate the design review process for electric vehicle charging stations. So it's interesting that this state law in 2015 actually complemented our city's 2012 Climate Action Plan strategy, which was to expedite permitting for electric vehicles. So that's nice that it complemented that. Today in the staff report, attachment 1 is the proposed ordinance, and attachments 2 through 4 are the checklists that will be given to applicants to confirm that they're addressing all the appropriate items, and also used by staff to make sure when they look at a submittal that it meets all those requirements and we can approve it expeditiously. The only regulatory authority that we'll have from a permitting standpoint will be state building standards, so electrical code, building code for accessibility, things like of this nature, but not design review. It won't go before any review boards. So some staff recommends that this committee forward an adoption recommendation to City Council after you've reviewed the ordinance and made your comments on it. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Hotchkiss.
Do you have any idea if this what kind of costs we're talking about? We don't get a cost here at all because it's totally individual, I guess. What are the safety elements? We're talking about transmittal of power, of significant energy, which could present all sorts of problems or challenges. Do we get into that at all here?
Yes, we do. Committee member Hotchkiss, sorry, I always want to say council member. We do. So like I had mentioned before, all of the state building standards, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, and building, they all apply. So we will do a review to those standards. They're limited to the scope of an electric vehicle charging station, so they're largely electrical standards. There are some accessibility standards that apply. For example, if someone wants to put in an electric vehicle charging station, the first one in their lot or at their site, they are going to have to make that van accessible. So it gets more complicated than just putting in an electrical vehicle charging station.
ADA stuff we're talking about.
Exactly,
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Does this apply to a charging station at your home?
Yes, it does. Residential, multifamily, and commercial.
So if you put one in at home, it's got to be ADA accessible somehow.
I'm sorry. No. At home, you're exempt from that.
Okay.
You can put it in voluntarily, but it's not a mandatory requirement.
Okay.
Multifamily housing of more than 2 units, it's required. And commercial, it's required to be accessible, but not for a single family or duplex.
Could someone put one in their commercial venture, such as a restaurant, and charge for its use as an attraction or whatever to their customers?
I would defer to the city attorney on that. It's not included in Senate Bill 1236, and it is not in the building standards. It's not prohibited, but...
Any thoughts?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I can reiterate what Mr. Stuffler just said, that this bill and this ordinance do not regulate that issue. As to whether or not a private entity could essentially charge, make a profit center out of an electrical vehicle station, I don't know if there are any regulations regarding that, but it doesn't that particular issue is not affected by this proposed
So I
ordinance.
guess it's possible we're saying here, but we don't know.
It's possible. I haven't seen anything that would preclude a property owner from doing that. I could conceive where that would happen. I'm aware that Tesla has superstations that they've developed around the state. I'm not sure how that works, whether you pay them for the electricity that you charge your Tesla with in those locations and so forth. Bottom line is, I don't know right now. I might be able to find an answer before council today.
I don't know if it's a pressing question or not, but it was just a thought. And are we expecting this would require additional power brought to the city?
That's not. I really can't, Mr. Chair and
Depends how
committee member
popular this
Hodges.
is.
Yeah, we have done no estimations on the capacity of the Edison electrical system and what it can, how many electric vehicles it can charge. what
Should
that
at some
load would
point
be.
we not talk to them about this?
As far as a utility distribution issue, yes, I think so. This ordinance doesn't address utility distribution. This is simply the point of the charger getting a permit on private property to install the charger.
Okay, so even though we don't address that here, is that an appropriate question to have at least answered or investigated when we bring this up before the city council? I think-
And we can ask the city attorney, but the state doesn't make any requirement for us to analyze our utility infrastructure. It just demands us to have an ordinance in place by September 2017.
Well, power is important, and we've had some power issues, so I'm wondering if that's not worth looking into a little bit. Did you have some thoughts?
Well, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, this is a state mandate. We have to have this ordinance in place. It's a matter of expediting the permit process for these stations. I understand where Councilmember Hotchkiss is coming from in the sense that over time, the more electrical vehicles we have, the greater demand on the electric system. You're basically shifting how the energy gets into your car. It's an issue. I think it's something that Edison would have to address but I would not recommend holding up this ordinance in not meeting the mandate for the procedure, the processing of these permits.
No, I agree. I just was trying to look down the line a little bit and think, what are the ramifications that come from this?
Ms. Brio, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stuffler. So the ordinance will be sensitive to historic properties. That's one of the items I read there. So you'll be working with our historian, or would you take it to one of the design review boards?
Mr. Chair, committee members, the answer is no. It's very unbiased to historical or any other resources that we might have that might be diminished because of the installation of a charger. So planning is going to publish a best practices guide, similar to what we do with the small solar photovoltaic systems, that help people understand, here's how you can screen, here's how you can kind of, with some etiquette and taste, meet your objective without going to design review. But there's no requirement for that, and so we can't force people to go through that process.
Oh, understood. Okay, so screening and other, as long as people have some information about the importance of that. Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
That brings up a good point. So in the EPV, could we not encourage screening of some sort? I did see an 18th century edifice with a huge charger on the side.
Mr. Chair and committee members, yes, we are going to encourage screening. We're going to have some best practices that planning will publish and will put with all the permits that we issue, but we cannot require it, we cannot inspect to it, we can only suggest.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Truff, this does remind me a lot of when we went through the thing with solar and some of the questions about the historical districts and the appropriate sizing of a solar array, for example, at a private home in some place like Plaza Rubio, and how that would go about. So when you say we don't have any design control, so if somebody wanted to build a charging station and make either an outbuilding or some kind of a stand or something, is there some kind of appropriate sizing that says this is more than you need to put a charging station in? Or is there something along those lines that where a local control would kick back in?
Mr. Chair and committee members, yes, there is. So the charging station is what we're expediting the permitting of. If someone wants to add ancillary sheds, service areas, whatever it might be, buildings or structures, retaining walls, those are all subject to review in our ordinary design review process and permitting process. But the charging station itself and the electrical supply to that charging station from wherever the main panel board is, the breaker box, that's what's being expedited.
So the standard for the thing that the pole that holds the charging station, whatever these things look like, are those standard issue? I'm sure different companies make different ones. And so I was just wondering, once again, if somebody were to say, well, I need this to shield or screen the charging station, your neighbor's going, you just put a 400 square foot unit up for your charging station. Or do you put in multiple charging stations for your home, which I assume would be allowed if you had the service? And I mean, I'm just thinking of the slippery slope road and thinking about, people who do things in neighborhoods that are not appropriate for the rest of the neighborhood. And once again, this is pulling local control away for a state purpose. But the concerns would be those where's the line of appropriateness for neighborhood compatibility? And do we have anything to say about something that's ancillary to or in addition to the standard that comes and holds up the electrical charge station itself?
Mr. Chair, committee members, those are valid concerns. And when the state takes a fairly draconian approach to permitting, as they've done here with the small solar photovoltaic systems, that does strip the authority from us to be able to regulate some of those finer matters. If someone wanted to abuse the process, they could put in multiple chargers at their home. As long as they don't use them for a commercial purpose, then they would be in a commercial use, right? And we would be able to regulate that with zoning. But if it's for their own personal use and they want to have 3 electrical vehicles with 3 chargers, this law allows them to do that.
Right. Ms. Mario.
I'd just like to make a motion to move this forward to the City Council. The ordinance is written.
Second.
Okay, then moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
That's it. We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this ordinance committee is adjourned.